Hello, viewing audience. Hi, my name's Enrique Velasquez, but most folks, especially if you've been to physical DragonCon, knows me as Q. I am the track director here at the alternate and historical fiction track. And welcome to DragonCon Goes Virtual 2020. Yay! So this has been fun. I hope all of you are very safe, that you are wearing your masks, you are taking care of yourself, washing your hands, all that other fun stuff. But we are really, really proud and very happy to present to you all kinds of fun stuff that hopefully you will already have been enjoying by the time this airs. And one of which is going to be right now. And normally we would cut to the moderator, but that's me. So yeah. I will be moderating today, and our panel is a lesson in Prohibition Cocktails, which is going to be quite a delight. So first off, before we get right into it, we're going to introduce our other panelists. And let's start off with Andy. Andy, I'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, my name is Andy Reed, and I am the self-proclaimed wound-up wino. I am a bartender. However, I also run a podcast, and I am so excited to be talking with y'all today about a cocktail that kind of merges the best of both worlds, spirits and wine.
And Ian.
Hello, my name is Ian Gibson. I'm a certified mixologist from the Professional Bartending School of Atlanta. I'm very excited today to be here. Thank you guys for having me. And when I'm not drinking at home, I'm also a manufacturing engineer for a company that designs and makes parts for the Navy.
And Amber?
Hello, my name is Amber Aristi. I am a brand ambassador, whiskey specialist, and all-around booze hound, working in the industry for several years, and now I'm here to talk to y'all about 1920s cocktails.
All right, guys, we are going to get right into things for a bit. So this panel idea kind of stemmed from just, the fact that we were, prior to, the Rona, we were genuinely expecting this year to be full of a bunch of 1920s speakeasy style parties. And that's kind of where this idea started from, because we are now rolling back into the 20s. But to give a much better sort of overview of Prohibition era and kind of like where the setting of the stage of the classic cocktails come from, I was going to kick this over to Amber to kind of take it away, and off you go.
Hello. So Prohibition cocktails are kind of a funny misnomer in a lot of ways. The time period that we're speaking of is indicative of an overall feeling of distrust with spirits. We had the Volstead Act of 1919, which went into effect in 1920 and lasted for 13 long years, that prevented us from drinking spirits and most especially imported spirits. It was much harder to get anything into the States at the time than it was to just drink things that were made on our own soil. A lot of things led up to this, including the temperance movement and all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, what happened was for 13 long years, there were no legal distilleries outside of medicinal use, no bars allowed, and absolutely no drinking allowed, which meant that cocktails from Prohibition era didn't technically exist, wink, wink. A lot of the cocktails that we know of that came from Prohibition era are either pre-Prohibition or right post-Prohibition, or things that folks cobbled together in these speakeasies, in these house parties, and everything that was happening down low, where an eye couldn't quite see you, right? So these cocktails, a lot of times, ended up being things that were created to disguise poor spirit, things that were either poorly distilled or flavored badly, or maybe not actually alcohol at all, wood alcohol being rampant in this time period, which was very, very dangerous. But it was gross. So we had to disguise some of those bad flavors and create something really, really beautiful out of something that wasn't so awesome. And so tonight we're going to present you with 3 different cocktails that were popular during the pre-Prohibition era and kind of went into a frenzy of popularity during Prohibition in these speakeasies and these quiet house parties. And we're going to present to you something that may have been made then and something that may be a little bit more palatable to you now.
And yeah, that was a great intro. Thank you so much, Amber. That was way better than I would have done and far more on point. And anyone that has heard me on a panel knows I tend to ramble a little bit. And to cut this rambling short, I wanted to kick things off over to Ian and ask you, what got you particularly interested in, like, I mean, obviously, yes, you mix drinks and you're certified and all that, but like, what about this particular kind of aesthetic feel, if not historical accuracy, like got you interested in like the classic origin of cocktails?
So to clarify, you're asking what got me into just 1920s or in cocktail history in general?
I will go with both.
So not to get too personal, but alcoholism does run in my family. And I thought of a way to combat it before alcohol bests me is I wanted to best alcohol. So I wanted to study it, I wanted to understand it, I wanted to respect it. So I got certified as a mixologist, and that is my way of trying to understand alcohol. In terms of the 1920s, it is a very interesting time in cocktail history for me. There is so much turbulence. Like Amber said, there's a lot of weird spirits. We have to do unique things. We're losing techniques. We have difficulty importing spirits like we once did. And it's a very fascinating time, very turbulent time, and a very cool thing to study, in fact.
Awesome. No, I was about to say Amber again. A names, fun. Andy, what about you? What got you interested in the era and all that other fun stuff?
Oh, so many things. I think a huge influence was, because I will admit, I am definitely more of a wine nerd than anything else. And I am a certified sommelier. And to study for that test, I had to have an in-depth knowledge of a variety of classic cocktails. And when I was studying for this test, my entire idea of a cocktail were those horrible, horrible, violently blue shots that you get at really sketch clubs. And I
the ones that taste like college.
Exactly. And I couldn't figure out why people were making such a fuss about these classic cocktails. What the hell was, what was the deal with those? And the more I read about them and the more I read about the history, the beautiful part about spirits and wine and alcohol in general is literally the building blocks of our history. So if you can name a spirit, there is a time and place that you can literally take yourself back to. And that's what got me so into the idea of classic cocktails, especially because with some of these older recipes, I've discovered things that I thought I did not like at all are actually delicious. Who would have thought?
Yeah. I, as a huge history nerd myself, kind of why I took over the track anyway. And for fans that have that are big fans of Hamilton or just recently saw it on Disney Plus, yeah, when I learned that like whiskey was pivotal to our country's founding and origin and history of all of that, I was just like, huh. And here I thought it just smelled like paint varnish. That's because my only experience with whiskey was the really cheap stuff. And I've since become quite a connoisseur. And also, hold on a second, I'm gonna shamelessly plug our local distillery that now makes 100 proof bourbon. There we go. That's awfully nice. Anyway, but let's go ahead and get rolling and talk about some of these classic cocktails. I want to go ahead and start with since Eddie, you were talking about being a sommelier a little bit, if you can kind of explain a little bit of like, why would someone that is going to study wine like need to know about cocktails, and sort of like transition that into the wine spirit drink that you've prepared, and tell us a little bit about why you chose it, and just go ahead and take it away from that.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm gonna have to mute myself now.
When it comes to studying for the Court of Sommeliers, they ask you to study these classic cocktails because 9 times out of 10, if a party is going out to a dinner at a fine dining restaurant that would have a sommelier, they're probably going to start their dinner off with a round of cocktails. And originally, I was kind of at a loss for what to pick for this panel, but then it occurred to me that I absolutely had to go with the Sazerac because this drink has evolved so much over the course of its own history that it's an OG pre-Prohibition cocktail. It was originally conceived in 1850 and it used cognac, and then due to a crisis in the wine world, that's why America had to switch from cognac to rye whiskey. So the fact that the histories of both the spirits and the drink itself, the spirits, the wine, and the drink itself were so interwoven, how could I not choose it? Plus, it takes 2 ingredients that, if you were to ask me on an average day, do you like anise flavored liqueur or do you like cognac? Normally I'd say no. I don't like overly sweet. I don't like things that taste like licorice. But if you put them together, mind blown, it's amazing. It's so good. So that is why I decided to roll with the Sazerac. Do you want me to actually like start making it?
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how it's made traditionally, and then the modern twist and all that. So just go right ahead and go right in.
Fabulous. So for a truly traditional Sazerac, I would have cognac and absinthe. However, I am not willing to spend a lot of money on a bottle of liqueur that I'm not going to drink. So instead, I went with the next best classical thing, because the Sazerac is literally the cocktail of New Orleans. I went with Absinthe, which is an anise flavored liqueur that is like New Orleans. Salute, love you. So to start this off, I've kind of set up a dual mixing station here, because the way the traditional cocktail is meant to be made is in an additional old-fashioned glass. For the more modern twist, I'm going to be mixing in a mixing glass because I make messes. It's just what I do. So to start off, I've had 2 old-fashioned glasses chilling with crushed ice that I beat myself. But to get to the real fun part of making the cocktail, we're going to take sugar cubes. Finding these is actually the hardest part of this recipe. I had to go to 3 different grocery stores and attempt to make them myself before I could find them. So you're going to take a sugar cube, you're going to put it into your mixing glass. And when I say that I'm making these cocktails simultaneously, it's because I am making a traditional Sazerac with the cognac. I am also making an improved whiskey cocktail. You see, a Sazerac has to be made with Peychaud's bitters. Also, New Orleans local. I love New Orleans so much. And you use 3 to 4 dashes of that. If you use anything besides Peychaud's bitters, it becomes an improved whiskey cocktail, because we're also going to be using whiskey in this instead of cognac.
Is there a particular reason why?
I think it's just New Orleans pride. I haven't found an actual reason why, but if you want the classic Sazerac, it has to be Peychaud's. There's just, you can switch the whiskey and the cognac up as much as you want, but if it's not Peychaud's, it's not a Sazerac. There's some very strong opinions there. Now.
So this, not this. Got it.
Exactly. Yes. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add our spirit. In my left, I believe the viewer's right. In the taller jigger, I have my cognac. So we're going to put that in the traditional mixing glass. And in my other hand, for the improved whiskey cocktail, I've actually got Bellmead bourbon. And traditionally in 1870, when you were making an improved whiskey cocktail or a different iteration of a Sazerac, you would actually wind up using rye whiskey. I chose Bellmead bourbon because it was a whiskey distillery that was immensely popular prior to Prohibition, and it also happens to be a very high rye content bourbon. So yes, it is predominantly corn, but it's also going to have that really nice rye spiciness that I want for this sort of modern take. Please tell me if this stirring is getting too loud, too obnoxious.
I really like the sound of a drink being stirred, so I'm fine with it.
We're going to try and whip this sugar into a frenzy because we are going to try and get this to dilute as fast as possible.
Okay, you can do the other one silently and just sort of stir it, and then it could be our ASMR content. There we go.
I think we all kind of miss the sound of a spoon hitting glass. You know, now that we're I can hear it, even if it's over a Zoom call.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm very impressed with how solid these sugar cubes are. So these might not get fully incorporated just for the sake of timing, but I will drink them anyway. I'm not a quitter. So.
If it helps out a little bit, as someone that is dealt with sugar cubes for a while, because there was a brief phase where I was a big tea fan. For folks that are just finding like the Domino sugar cubes, which are like super cheap, they're super cheap for a reason. If your beverage is not hot, it will stay a cube for quite some time. The fancier sugar cubes dissolve almost immediately, simply because it's a looser grain, looser packed cube, which is why it's always at least 3 or 4 times more expensive. Just there you go.
Yeah, these particular sugar cubes I picked up are European apparently, and super hard. So I'm going to now proceed to dump out the ice that had my proper glasses chilling, and we're going to do an absinthe, an anise liqueur absinthe rinse, and that just involves splashing a little bit of this beautifully violently green liquid into these glasses and swirling it around. And to myself, this smells atrocious. I do not like the smell of licorice at all, but it adds this complexity to this cocktail that is, like I said, amazing. And then I just dump it, which is my favorite part. And now I'm just going to take my strainer, because this is traditionally just served straight up. Beautiful, beautiful drinks. Get all this nonsense out of the way. And then these are garnished with a lemon twist.
Now, is it just garnished, or do you put some of the oil from the rind or any of that?
I mean, it is definitely one of those where you always, if you're using a peel as a garnish, you definitely want to get the oil in there and get it all around the lip of the glass. And there's the traditional. Now I've decided that it would be fun for this improved whiskey cocktail to be improved with just a touch of fire. So I'm going to actually flame the peel over the oil, or flame the peel over the cocktail, and just to see if it makes any difference. I don't know if it actually will or not, but
science. There you go.
Science and fire.
Your sample size of 1. There. All right. So is you were saying earlier with your you're just sort of getting the coating on the glass and then dumping it out. It's kind of like you do with a proper martini with vermouth. You just want it coating the glass. Is there a particular reason? Are there recipes where they actually leave the absinthe in the Sazerac, or no?
Uh, for all of the classic recipes that I have found, none of them actually leave the absinthe in. I'm sure for more modern takes on the cocktail, there are, I'm sure people adding like a quarter of an ounce. But the tricky thing with absinthe and those anise liqueurs is that they do have a very, very powerful flavor. And while a rinse is accenting the cognac notes and the whiskey notes, adding too much is just you're just going to taste licorice, and that it's not a balanced cocktail.
As someone that doesn't like licorice either, I'm with you on that. Like I have had versions of Sazeracs that are very modern that basically taste like a Twizzler, which for me is gross. But traditionals are fantastic. Amber, Ian, do you guys have anything you want to? Yes.
Yeah, I love that you used herb saint. I think one of the things that's really cool about herb saint that we don't talk about anymore because we have absinthe and we don't have to talk about it anymore is that part of the reason pastis became so popular in the States is because absinthe was illegal. And we needed something to put in our Sazeracs. Like,
Yeah.
And why was absinthe illegal, Amber? He said, as if he didn't already know the answer. Oh, come on.
look,
Play along here. All right. So for folks that love to like joke about the green fairy and all that crap, it's complete propaganda is why absinthe is illegal. Because of bad shipping and rumor and hearsay, people genuinely believed that wormwood would cause like hallucinations and poisoning, which also didn't help with the fact that we had some really, really bad ties with France during that time period anyway. Really has never changed much. Yeah, so that was a big reason why that one. Ian, your thoughts before we move on to you for, I believe, our next drink, but do you have any commentary?
Yeah, I completely agree with Amber. Andy, I think it's a great touch that you used herb saint right now because it was when Prohibition ended in 1933, herb saint made its first batch of herb saint, which is also an anagram for absinthe. So I think it's a fantastic touch you used it. And for anyone who doesn't enjoy anise, I do encourage that you do try Sazerac. And actually my preferred version is with cognac. Don't let that deter you. There is something magical about the balance between the two. Andy, you're absolutely right about that.
Andy, about the wine conspiracy.
Oh yes, because that's exactly why I got so excited there for a second, because we were talking about availability of spirits, and then it just occurred to me that, oh my God, yes, this is the entire reason I chose to do the Sazerac in the first place. So the Sazerac cocktail was developed in 1850 when a coffee house, the Merchant Exchange Coffee House in New Orleans, was sold because the owner had decided to sell out and become a cognac importer. So the person who took over the bar and named it the Sazerac Coffee House, he started using the previous owner's cognac as a spirit for the Sazerac cocktail. That's how the cocktail got started. Now, unfortunately, right around the 1860s, 1870s, so cognac is made from grapes. It's a distilled grape spirit. In the 1860s, 1870s, there was a massive production problem in France because somebody had brought over American vines, and in doing so had brought over American vine pests. These particular ones were called phylloxera, and phylloxera proceeded to decimate essentially all of Europe's vineyards for a good 20, 30 years before they figured out a solution. So we weren't actually able to get cognac in America for the longest time because it would be too expensive because nobody could produce it. That's why the switch to rye whiskey happened in 1870. And that's how it became a more traditionally American cocktail. And it's such a fascinating intermingling of history.
Yeah, I've actually never had it with brandy. Like I think I've always had it with rye.
Oh, it's delicious. It's yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Two thumbs way up.
All right. So yeah. I think we're gonna move over to our next presenter here. Ian, you've got honest to God one of my favorite drinks in the classic cocktail menu. And you know, I'm not spoiling anything, but gin is like the unofficial spirit of steampunks, and I kind of grew up a steampunk. Well, not grew up; I was already old. But I started running the track like at the peak steampunk, and and everybody were gin drinkers, and I was just like, it tastes like freaking pine sol. I can't stand it. Oh my god! And this particular cocktail turned me around on gin, so I am forever grateful. All right, so with that introduction, Ian, would you like to take it away and let folks know what you're going to be talking about, and most importantly, the story behind it, because that's one of my favorite parts.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Q. I do appreciate, there's some screaming going on in the background, and that is my bird who's mad about me putting him in another room. So I do apologize for the audio in the background. But yes, I'm doing the French 75, which was a very, very popular cocktail during Prohibition era, and it does have a very unique history. Right before Prohibition, American bars were the top of the world and everyone wanted to emulate them. And then that all came to a stop when Prohibition happened. Now as we know French 75 today, it is a gin-based spirit with, or gin-based cocktail with champagne in it. And there we do have accounts of champagne in cocktails, champagne with gin in drinks all the way back to the 1860s. But we don't have any accounts of the actual 75 back that far. The first account that we have of the French 75 is from a cocktail book called Harry's ABC of Mixing Cocktails by Harry McEllen from 1922. I actually have the 1923 edition of it right here. And the recipe of the 75 cocktail at the time was a teaspoon of grenadine, 2 dashes of absinthe, which, I'm sorry, Andy, we're going to use absinthe in this one too. 2/3 Calvados and then 1/3 gin, which is shaken well and strained into a cocktail glass. And it says here this cocktail is very popular in France during the war and named after the French light field gun, which is because it packs such a punch. It's very, very potent drink. The 2/3 Calvados, 1/3 gin is an interesting thing because it's not 2/3 ounces, it's not 2/3 liters, it's not 2/3 parts. It's just 2/3 Calvados. So if we take that, the ratios at the time were unique. And again, sorry, I should have mentioned that this publication was actually in London, not in the United States. So they're trying to emulate American bars, like I mentioned. If we try to emulate 2/3 as more of a balanced cocktail, we might do something close to 2/3 of 3 ounces, which would be 2 ounces of Calvados and 1/3 gin. And there's a fantastic history with Calvados as well. I'm sure Andy can go into it. It's a grape-based spirit as well, and you should give it a try. So I'm gonna make the original version very quickly. This is a spirit forward cocktail, which is unique that you'd shake it. You would expect, just like with the Sazerac, that you'd stir it. In fact, with absinthe and Calvados, it's pretty similar to a Sazerac, but we're going to go ahead and shake it just like they wanted. So we're going to use a teaspoon of grenadine, homemade grenadine here. We've got 2 dashes of absinthe. I've got a small volume because I don't want to, me as well, I'm not a huge fan of just absinthe by itself, but I do enjoy it in cocktails like this. So I'm going to do 2 dashes of absinthe. And then I mentioned before, I'm going to do 2 ounces of Calvados. I'm using Calvados here actually from France, and I'm using a VSOP Calvados. And then if I'm going to use gin, since we're over in Europe, I'm going to use something from London. So let's use Bombay Sapphire. At this point in history with cocktails, we are out of a Holland gin. We are out of an Old Tom gin. We're in London Dry territory here, especially in this area of Europe. We're going to shake for about 15 seconds to chill and dilute.
So, Ian, is there a particular reason why it's shaken and not stirred? Insert Bond joke here.
Yeah, so in traditional senses, you would shake a drink that has something that clouds the drink. Lemon juice, egg white, cream, things like that. You would stir a drink that is spirit forward, Manhattan, martini, Sazerac, for example. Shaking will make the drink colder and dilute it more and incorporate air. Stirring, chill it less, dilute it less. It will not incorporate air. Keep it nice and clear. So in this case, it's unique that we shake it, but that's what the recipe calls for, so we're going to do that. It doesn't say to double strain, so I'm not going to. It recommends to serve it in a cocktail glass. Now, just like Andy did, if I was doing this exactly right, I would have actually had ice in here and letting it chill while I make it. I put it in the freezer because I'm lazy. So here's the original 75 cocktail. Cheers.
Right on. So you were talking about your homemade grenadine. I also do that when I mix drinks, simply because,
yes.
In my opinion, store-bought grenadine is garbage. So do you have any recommendations on grenadine for folks that aren't aware of how to make it at home?
So I like using it's pomegranate. I know there's a lot of people who think it's cherry. It's pomegranate juice and sugar, and I actually just use a 1-to-1 ratio of pomegranate juice to sugar. Let it heat, let it dissolve, chill it, and it's good. So, but play with the ratios you like. I'm always encouraging people to use things that fit their palate. If you like it a little bit stronger, a 2-to-1 ratio of sugar to pomegranate juice, use that. I'm totally for it.
But like Andy was talking about earlier, I genuinely thought anyone that put grenadine in drinks were blasphemy, and then somebody introduced me to, how grenadine's supposed to taste. I'm like, oh wow, that's actually really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun little ingredients like that have lost their way throughout time, just like maraschino cherries and maraschino cherries is another example.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so you have a more modern take on the French 75 that you're going to talk about next.
Yeah, if I may, I was going to do one near the end of Prohibition and then do the modern interpretation, if that's okay.
Oh, go for it.
It also allows me to make more drinks and have me drink more drinks, if that's cool with everyone.
My whiskey sour says you've got time, so we're good.
Perfect. All right, so towards the end of Prohibition, we're now in 1927. We actually have a publication from Here's How by Judge Jr. This is published in New York, which means we're back in the States. And I have that publication right here. It's actually kind of fun. It says this drink is really what won the war for the Allies. It says 2 jiggers of Gordon's water. Just like Amber says, we can't drink here. We're not going to drink gin. We're drinking Gordon's water. Jigger is actually a unit of measure. It's 1.5 ounces. So we're already off to 3 ounces off the bat. It is potent. There's a reason it's so strong. 1 part lemon juice, which is again unique. Now I have a part here, but we have a unit of measure before. It's kind of unique. I'm going to use 1 ounce of lemon juice. A spoonful of powdered sugar, cracked ice, fill the rest of a tall glass with champagne. I actually call it champagne here. And just like I mentioned before, if you use club soda instead of champagne, you got a Tom Collins. Fun thing about this publication with Here's How, they also had a toast for every drink that they published, and here's the toast for the French 75. Here's the present day culture, which doesn't care about your English if your Scotch is all right, which may be a nod to Harry McEllen, who published the original definition, as he was from Scotland. So let's go ahead and make that. So I'm going to use 2 jiggers or 3 ounces of gin. I'm going to use a Juniper Forward gin here. In the States, I had a lot of trouble getting gin. Like Amber said, we couldn't really get anything imported, and the stuff we were making here was unique.
So I can shamelessly plug a panel that we normally do on the track. So for folks that are coming to DragonCon next year, odds are very likely we'll be talking about moonshining, like moonshiners and bathtub hooch and bathtub gin, and all the ways that we illegally and clandestinely made alcohol back during that time.
That is a fantastic history, absolutely.
Oh yeah, I think, Amber, didn't you moderate the moonshiner panel we did last year? Is that correct?
I did. It was such a good time.
Yeah, that was a good one. All right, cool. So, sorry, Ian, go ahead.
No, I enjoy talking about this stuff. So anytime we want to deviate, I'm totally cool with that. I'm going to use an ounce of lemon juice. I have fresh squeezed lemon juice here. If there is one thing I encourage everyone who's listening to do is use fresh ingredients. So yes, thank you, Q. So for the sake of time, I've already went ahead and fresh squeezed. It says a bar or a spoon of powdered sugar. Again, that's subjective. I know pre-Prohibition, there's a lot of sweet tooths, a lot of sweet tooths. And I'm willing to bet that in Prohibition, we used whatever we could to try to combat some of the lovely flavors that were in our drinks. So I'm going to use as big a bar spoon as I can to try to combat that. That looks good. Now, it doesn't say one way to, if you're supposed to build in the glass or not. There's a publication in 1930 in the Savoy Cocktail Book. This publication really got the drink kicked off. It is basically the same recipe. There's a little bit of differences, but it does say to pour into a Collins glass. And because it's not built, I'm going to say pour, which means I'm going to shake it as well, especially with the lemon juice.
So while Ian's shaking, I've had this version of the classic recipe before, and I know we're going to be adding in champagne in a minute, but this is something where I wasn't a fan of gin. I was not a fan of champagne, and while I saw it being made for me, I was like, there is no way I'm liking this. But much like licorice and rye, I was like, somehow these things together just so good.
Yeah, absolutely they do. It does call for cracked ice. Back in the day, they would take chunks of ice and crack it over the glass. For the sake of time, I went ahead and pre-did that into a bowl. So I'm just going to go ahead and dump some of this in here. The idea of cracked ice is you're going to have some that are big and some that are small. The idea is you're going to have some irregularities in the sizing of the ice. If you want to do crushed ice, you use different equipment. It's called out, but they did serve this drink on ice.
So I actually have a fun little tidbit here. This is a vintage ice pick, specifically for for bars. It's basically aggro ice pick right here. It's great. I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, I love that tool. I've got some bigger ice blocks in there that I'm actually using.
Oh yeah, no, it's great. When my ice machine broke in my refrigerator, I was going to town with this piece. It was wonderful.
I put my thing out here now. Just like Andy, I thought about actually getting champagne for the class, and I wanted to make this, or I should say, panel really accurate. But I didn't want to drink a whole bottle of champagne. And I just got Prosecco, and it was on sale. I'm sorry, this is not accurate.
This isn't drunk history. That's coming up next.
So, but use what you like. Use the sparkling wine that you like. And Andy, I have a lot of respect that you've passed the sommelier exam. I'm not super fluent in a lot of wine knowledge and history. I hope this is palatable, and I'm sorry if it's not.
It's fine for the panel. I will say that if you would like a champagne quality wine but not want to pay champagne prices, there is in fact a wine producer in Albuquerque, New Mexico called Gruet. Yeah, it's run by actual champagne vintners who left France and decided to come make champagne style wine in America. And Albuquerque is apparently the best place to do that. So it's for more than just meth. Go figure.
Wait, I know why. Oh my God, I would suspect that, because I know when Albuquerque, especially in the 60s and 70s, they were doing a big push because like for anybody that has access to satellite footage in the early days of the space race, there's literally nothing in all of New Mexico. No, there's a reason why. So in the 60s and 70s, they had this big push to try to get people to grow any kind of product in New Mexico. And they like subsidized the heck out of the irrigation systems there. So you could literally grow damn near anything. And that's awesome.
That's great, but that wasn't what I had a question about. It's like, who has satellite images of Albuquerque in the 60s and 70s?
I don't know, man. I've been watching a lot of alternate history about the space race lately. So incidentally, For All Mankind, great show. Anyway, yeah.
I'm gonna mute myself now.
All right, so Ian, we are ready to serve. It looks like.
All right, so we're going to top this 1927 version with a product not from New Mexico, but it sounds like I have to I'll go procure some product from there. And this is the French 75. It was newly named in 1927, the French 75 cocktail. And again, here's the present day culture, which doesn't care about your English if your Scotch is all right. Cheers.
Hello. So Ian, that looks delicious and refreshing and wonderful. I've got a question as you transition to the more modern version here. And I only know this from science history podcasts that I listen to, but you know, are you aware like when these whole like archaic measurements did they not get standardized at all until like the metric system, or was it just sort of a conceit of, you know, publications, or what's going on with that?
It's a complicated question to answer, but it's a solid question to ask. You have different areas of the world using different systems and also using different tools. And when you study making drinks, you know, 1860s, 1810s, 1890s, and these times you have to consider the tools that they're using and how they're measuring drinks. And also a lot of bartenders made a living off of their unique drinks, and they didn't want their exact recipes really out. So nowadays, as we've gotten into this cocktail revival, modern mixology, molecular mixology, we've tried to standardize a lot of these measurements. And that started to happen end of the 1990s, early 2000s, definitely in the 2010s, has that kind of taken off. But before then, it's really hard to say. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, cool. So if I'm to go into a bar today and order a French 75, or if I'm gonna make it at home, this is how I would expect it to be made. I'm gonna use 1.5 ounces of gin because I'm pretty sure my wife is gonna drink this one. She's really into this Jasmine and Rose gin from London. So I'm gonna use one of her favorite gins right now. I guess I also should mention, if you are working at home and you are doing this relatively new, or you're doing a recipe for the first time, you may want to go from the least expensive ingredient to the most expensive, just in case you mess it up, you have a chance to fix it or toss away some, you know, not as expensive ingredients. In order to make a more balanced cocktail, because this one's very booze heavy, the one from 1927, it's 3 ounces of gin. I'm actually going to pare back and use just 1/2 ounce of lemon juice. And in order to make sure that the sugar incorporates, I've gone ahead and made some simple syrup. And I should have prepped it out, and I didn't, and I apologize. 1/2 ounce of simple syrup. And this simple syrup is a 1-to-1 ratio of sugar to water. Okay. Again, load it with ice. And shake for 15 seconds. If you served it to me in a Collins glass with ice, it'd be cool, but in the 1920s, so champagne flute, why not? In order to catch the ice shards and the citrus pulp, I'm going to double strain into the champagne flute. And of course, the champagne flute should be chilled. You saw me getting out of the here. Top it with our champagne. And you notice the first two drinks didn't call for a garnish. If I'm served without a garnish, I'm fine. If I want to jazz it up, I would take a lemon peel and a couple of maraschino cherries, and I would toss that right in. And nice. Here is the modern version of the French 75. An absolutely fantastic cocktail. If you aren't a fan of gin, this might be a good segue. If you are at a New Year's Eve party, maybe this. Also, maybe a brunch cocktail instead of mimosa. Try French 75. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, fantastic. All right, so as much as I would love to keep going here, I know we're starting to get a little quick on time, so I'm gonna switch it right over to Amber. Amber, you have got another classic coming at us here, so you wanna talk a little bit about kind of what had you come up with the, like how you selected the drink, and then go right into your presentation. And I know you've got camera angles and everything, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I chose the Jack Rose, and I chose the Jack Rose for a couple of reasons. One being it was a hit with authors. Hemingway wrote about it in A Sun Also Rises in 1926. The main character is drinking it in a Paris hotel. So there is mention of it during Prohibition. It was wildly popular overseas. And Steinbeck mentioned on multiple occasions that the Jack Rose was his favorite cocktail. We do know that the earliest reference of a Jack Rose cocktail is going to be somewhere around 1900, 1905. So it does land in that pre-Prohibition area, but it gained massive popularity during Prohibition, I think partially because it was made from American-made spirit. So Applejack is a really, really awesome spirit made from apple brandy and neutral grain spirit. At the time, they would do this thing called jacking, which is why it's called Applejack, right? So jacking is essentially creating a spirit, a cider, but leaving it out to freeze in its barrel so that all the water freezes off. You could strain the ice out, and you're left with an almost 30%, like almost just hot beer.
Amber, I just checked with the censorship board. I think we can get away with saying jacking on the panel. I think you're fine.
Oh, are we doing phrasing? Is phrasing still a thing?
Yeah, you didn't get the memo? Of course.
So it's this lovely, lovely spirit that has kind of a lot to offer. Back then, this super concentrated cider was essentially the Applejack. But here's the problem with doing that, is that if you're doing that, you're not really removing any of the methanols or fusel alcohols or any of those kind of evil congeners that will, you know, make you go blind or possibly kill you. So that is no longer done. Now what we do is we make an apple brandy from fresh apples. So we ferment those apples, make a cider, pass that through distillation process, and then blend it with what we call neutral grain spirit, which is essentially a collection of grains distilled to high proof so that it's flavorless, odorless, and tasteless. Cough, cough, vodka. So this cocktail has a lot of ties in that sort of pre-Prohibition era. We don't really know where the name came from, but we think that it's because it's Applejack and grenadine. So funny that we've been talking about grenadine off and on through the course of tonight. It is one of the key components of this cocktail. So back then, as we were just discussing, we didn't really have measurements the same way that we do today. If you're interested in those measurements and how they've evolved and how to translate those, there's this wonderful book called Punch that kind of goes through a lot of these older cocktails where punches were really popular because you just dump all the alcohol in. But he has a really great section in there about what those parts and all those little bits and bobs mean. So I highly recommend checking that out. I got this particular recipe from Vintage Spirits and Forgotten Cocktails. Dr. Cocktail is a wonderful cocktail historian and came up with this recipe, which is kind of a mix of all of them put together. The Jack Rose is what we call a compound sour. So essentially what that means is a sour is any cocktail that is made with base spirit, citrus, and some kind of sugar. This particular one is a compound cocktail because we're using grenadine. And grenadine is a component that a bartender would have made by hand, especially back then. You couldn't just go to the store and get roses. Ian used a pomegranate grenadine, which is historically correct and absolutely delicious. I chose to use a cherry one for this particular cocktail because I think that the cherry really suits that apple flavor. So it's a really nice combination there. The other thing is that this particular cocktail calls for half a lime, which is so awkward. But since it called for half a lime, I'm gonna put half a lime right in there. I'm just gonna squeeze it right in so that I don't have to worry about it. That's gonna be probably about half an ounce, depending on the juiciness of your lime and the size of it, obviously. The next ingredient is the grenadine. Here's the thing, is it asks for 2 dashes, which I don't know how you're dashing grenadine. It's syrup, but I'm going to say that that's about a bar spoon and a half. So I'm going to put that in there. And then I'm going to use 1.5 ounces of Applejack. This is only 40% alcohol by volume. So it is not going to knock your socks off as far as proofing goes, which is nice. Put some fresh ice over that. Give it a shake.
So while Amber is shaking her moneymaker over there, I thought I'd like to point out a fun little historical fact. You know, apples in general was not actually consumed for food of any kind until way later in history. It was mostly used for brandy and booze more than anything else in like its life cycle as a product of the Americas, which I just find fascinating. Oh yeah, basically the Johnny Appleseed, that guy you learned when you grew up in school, kids, booze hound. Yeah, there you go. Enjoy.
Well, if I may add to the apple things, if I'm not interrupting Amber. So the French were technically doing it first because Calvados.
Oh, okay, yeah, fine.
Calvados is an apple brandy, so
Yeah.
France. Not as cool as the Greeks or the Romans, but they're up there.
They're up there, and Calvados is such a lovely spirit. And I actually considered making this with Calvados in the beginning, but decided that Laird's is just too cool and that I had to use it. They were opened in 1698, only paused distillation during Prohibition when obviously the Volstead Act dictated that they could no longer produce. But they were one of the first distilleries to get their licensing back when 1933 repeal happened. So they've been producing almost nonstop since 1698, which I just think is maybe one of the coolest things ever, especially for an American distillery. So traditionally served in a Manhattan glass. And I found out, and this is just kind of a fun tidbit here, is that martini glasses were popular during Prohibition because the wide rim allowed a patron to quickly slosh their drink out if the cops came and did a raid. So they could lose their alcohol really, really quickly, which is hilarious because it is now just an absolute nightmare for servers country over.
So, like Amber, that looks delicious, and I know what I am going to be stocking my bar up with shortly. But the book that you were talking about, I know I have shamelessly plugged that book on previous panels over my lifespan. But if folks are wanting to like learn more about like how some of these cocktails were made or things like that, like where would you suggest they go?
Oh, yeah. So David Wondrich is the author of the book Punch, which I so highly recommend on so many levels, partially because it is like such a great history lesson, but also because David Wondrich is just a hilarious human. It's just incredible. His voice as an author is funny, and he is such a nerd about this. I mean, he never bartended. He just really liked cocktails, and he really liked history. So he just started digging through old documents, reading all of the old bartending manuals. Goes into depth about Jerry Thomas, who is kind of the godfather of cocktail making in a lot of ways. It's a wild ride. Reading his books is wild, but it's absolutely worth it.
So the your modern version, I'm assuming, is going to take some left turns.
It's going to take quite a bit of left turns. The other thing that the Jack Rose is known for is that nobody can agree on whether you're supposed to use lime juice or lemon juice. For Applejack, I thought lime would be really nice because it brings a bit of a zesty zinginess, really nice tart acidity to a cocktail. Lemon juice tends to be a little bit rounder on the palate, tends to stick around a little bit more. It's going to be a little bit softer. And the other thing that I did is I switched it up a bit because I think what's really cool about Prohibition and pre-Prohibition cocktails is that they were really limited with what they could do. You know, they only had a certain number of spirits that they were able to get their hands on. There was only a certain number of ingredients that they could use, but we don't have that problem anymore. So I am using an Irish whiskey, which may seem like it's come in a little left from center, but hear me out. Whiskey loves lemon, and anyone that loves an Irish or that loves a whiskey sour is going to love this cocktail. So obviously Ireland couldn't import any or export any of their whiskey, Scotland either, France, because there were blockades. We couldn't get any of the whiskey over here, and it decimated the Irish whiskey sort of landscape for almost 100 years. So for this particular cocktail, I thought we'd do a bit of an ode to what could have been.
An alternate history, if you will.
Hey.
You know your audience, girl. All right, what do we got here? So this version has got slain Irish whiskey, lemon instead of lime, and what else?
Say that again.
All right, so your modern version has you're using slain as the Irish whiskey for some reason.
Yeah.
And I don't think folks know that you work with slain, correct? Yes, is the job? Isn't that what you do?
I do work with slain, but I, while biased, entirely unbiased. I love all whiskey equally.
But you've got the Irish whiskey, and you're using lemon for the modern instead of the lime for the traditional.
That same sort of cherry grenadine, a little bit of a lemon expression to brighten up the nose. And then I'm just going to pop that lemon peel over the top there.
Wow. And it's this one's in a margarita glass. All right.
Oh, well, it's in my rose glass. I couldn't say no to that. Perfect.
That looks delicious. I kind of want to dive into both of those drinks. Okay. So Yeah, I have no more words here, so let's go ahead and wrap up. But before we kind of close out, Andy, Ian, do you guys have anything you wanted to add about the Jack Rose and with Amber?
Personally, I absolutely love it. My one note might have been set the lemon on fire, but
Little
that's
bias.
just me. That's just add more fire. It's fine. It's fine.
Feel like we're asking a lot, giving me fire. It's probably safer just to go with the expression.
Ian?
The Jack Rose is a fantastic cocktail, and it's one that needs its own revival, like we've seen with a lot of like the daiquiri and other drinks like that. It's absolutely delicious. I love the take with Irish whiskey. I bet that's actually delicious, and I might have to make that after we get done here.
Yeah.
So that was absolutely fantastic. The other thing I thought is kind of fun is we have a similarity between all these cocktails. We have absinthe, we have grenadine, we have a great base spirit. And I think it's kind of unique that we all chose different drinks, but they all have these similarities during this time frame in history.
But I think it also speaks to what Amber was talking about earlier, right? Like, most of the bars that you would go to is fairly limited selection, right? But in just there was a through line here, and to be able to make, even if someone's kind of doing a traditional themed party, right? Even if you just make those 3 cocktails, there's enough variety in just those 3 that all of your guests are going to be thrilled. So, I say that's a winner. Amber, to kind of start off with you this time, if folks want to, stalk you online and ask you like super nerdy booze questions after this virtual panel, how would they follow kind of what you're doing and where you are and all that fun stuff?
First of all, I'd like to say, if you have really nerdy booze questions, please reach out. Nothing in life gives me more joy than answering nerdy booze questions. So bring it on.
This is true.
You can reach me at Drams with Amber on Instagram. So like you're taking a dram with me, Drams with Amber.
I think I saw you do like a cooking segment on Instagram on that one with booze, and it was
with booze a
nice.
lot. Yeah. So the boozy baking recipe, I got you covered.
Awesome. All right. Ian, if folks wanted to kind of follow up with you and ask you some questions, where could they find you?
So I'm limited on social media. I do apologize. The only social media I really do is Facebook. But I do a public cocktail class every Saturday to help people who are in quarantine who might need a little bit of help getting themselves through this difficult time. So you can find me on Facebook, Ian Gibson, and I'd be more than happy to talk booze or cocktails with anybody. It's one of my favorite topics.
Awesome. Andy, where can folks find you and listen to your podcast that apparently might have me in it at some point in the future that you keep threatening me with?
Oh, you're definitely going to be in it. Don't you worry.
Okay.
You're going to be in it. I've just got to do a little bit of taste testing first because I have an idea. But beyond that, if you are looking to get a hold of me on social media, you should absolutely reach out to me on either Instagram or Twitter at WoundUpWino. I do have a quite lovely podcast that has just recently started, but actually Amber's going to be, by the time this airs, she will have been my second official guest. So Amber will be my second official guest on my podcast, The Wound Up Wino, which can be found on Spotify, Overcast, and a Google podcast.
All the places that you get podcasts, because that's Anchor for you. So there you go.
Anchor, yes. So if you want to ask me any really fun, nerdy wine questions, or I do also have a plethora of spirit knowledge, so I'm more than happy to get nerdy with that. Otherwise, I'm just a magical girl in training, just having fun, sipping some whiskey.
Right on. All right, everybody. So hopefully, since we've got the Facebook event that this is premiering on, you guys can go check out the Facebook event, and we should be able to like link their social media accounts. If you guys want to follow up with the alternate and historical fiction track or anything else you may want to know about, you can find us at alternatehistory.dragoncon.org, and we are there. We have got all the social medias. I do not. I am like Ian, but worse. I do not exist on social media anymore. So if you need to talk to me, get a hold of me through the track and someone will tell me that it's there. And then we'll figure that out. So thank you all so very much and have a great rest of your virtual DragonCon. Ciao.